It's been 32 years since partition. Margaret Thatcher has been Prime Minister of the United Kingdom for 1 month. Something is probably going on in Australia, and West Indies is still the best team in the world. It is 1979, and it is time for the second Men's ODI World Cup. Okay, Naresh, we are back. Episode 2. It is still called the Prudential Cup. 4 years later, our great sponsors are sticking with this tournament. It is once again hosted in England. It is once again everybody's wearing their all whites, red ball, day only. They have 3 days scheduled for all the matches. Same stuff we learned in 1975. Tournament format is also still the same. So there's a single round robin before the semis and the finals. And our contestants this year are almost unchanged from the inaugural edition. We have Australia, England, India, New Zealand, Pakistan, West Indies, Sri Lanka, and replacing East Africa. Do you have any guesses?
I feel like that's a trick question.
It's a surprise.
Okay. In that case, I want to say it's either Afghanistan or Bangladesh.
No, those would both kind of make sense.
Yeah.
It is Canada.
Oh, yes. I did. Okay, I knew Canada had competed in a World Cup and they've had a team for a while, but
Yeah,
okay.
they've been around for like a long time and they
Yeah,
managed
that's
to
pretty cool.
qualify for this 1979 edition, which I found to be fascinating
How
because
did their
they are
qualifiers
not
work?
good now.
Right. How did their qualifier work? Like where did they go?
So that's what I have next is
Okay.
today, instead of like a big background of what the World Cup is, the background is going to be how did we get to Sri Lanka and Canada?
Hmm.
The other six nations, if you didn't join us for the first episode, are the six test playing nations at the time, minus South Africa, which due to apartheid is not allowed to compete in ICC sanctioned events. So they actually held a qualification tournament called the ICC Trophy. Like that was how the qualifiers worked. And the top two teams from that tournament were able to participate in this World Cup. So it took place in England the month before the World Cup took place. The semifinals for this tournament took place 3 days before the World Cup started. And the final of this tournament was held during the World Cup, 2 days before the World Cup final. So, like, the two teams that won the semifinals immediately had to play in the World Cup. And then 3 weeks later, after they'd been knocked out of the World Cup, played for the championship of this quote unquote ICC trophy. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I hear that I'm assuming travel was a lot more expensive back then. So it's like you're trying to consolidate all of these events to maximize efficiency. But that's just
It's a
a
lot of
lot of
cricket.
cricket. Yeah, that's a
And it's
lot
a
of
long time
cricket.
away from home. And more importantly, like, you have to get in the headspace of like, okay, now let's play for the World Cup, but this tournament's not done. And then like we've been knocked. What if one of those teams made the finals? Like I know it's unlikely, but like
Right,
what
right,
are
right.
you doing? I think that's how little regard everybody else had for those countries of like they won't make the finals.
That's
And they
so
were right.
disrespectful.
But yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Right.
So this tournament was 15 teams.
Mm.
Three pools of five, everyone's favorite tournament format. So the countries were in alphabetical order: Argentina, Bangladesh, Bermuda, Canada, Denmark, East Africa, Fiji, Israel, Malaysia, the Netherlands, Papua New Guinea, Singapore, Sri Lanka, the United States, and Wales.
Okay. That's honestly, there are a lot of countries there that are pretty surprising. I think the
Yep.
most surprising was Fiji.
I thought
Um,
the most surprising was Israel.
yeah,
I've never heard of Israeli cricket. Like,
yeah.
at
Wait,
least I know
yeah,
they play cricket like over in South Asia and in Australia, New Zealand.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
Fiji's
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
over there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you say it like that, because yeah, no, that's super weird. Now, I mean, it was the Fiji and the Israel, I guess back to back. That like, I was thinking about, yeah, I don't know. That's crazy. It's But that's
So
cool though. The fact that they had this many teams show up and
three of those
actually compete.
teams, three of those teams were winless. Do you want to take a stab
Mm,
at the three winless teams?
stop. That's mean. Let's see. It's got to be okay. United States.
No. I
Really?
think the US actually might have had two and they might have only had one win, but I think they had two.
Okay. Okay. So not the United States.
Also, brief pause, and everybody who's watching who's not American, you can stop listening. I did go ahead and look at that roster, and there was only like five or six South Asian sounding names. Like there was a lot of white names on that team. So it was before I guess the United States like realized that they should use the Asian diaspora to their advantage in cricket
Well, I'm unsure if Oracle was around at that point, but
to
we'll
employ all
see.
these people.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so the three teams that went winless, I'd say, I mean, Fiji.
Yep.
There you go. Okay, I have to assume Israel.
No, and we'll talk about that in a
Okay.
second.
Okay, so Fiji. I mean, East Africa competed in the previous World Cup, so
Right.
they've had some experience. So you assume they would be good. Denmark.
No, they actually made the semis, I believe, and
Oh,
lost in the
okay,
semis. The
okay,
other
okay.
two were Argentina and
Hmm.
Malaysia.
I mean, the Argentinians, that makes sense because they're probably prepping for like a soccer World Cup or something. So I'll give
Oh,
them a pass.
you
And
just
then,
don't think their government was funneling enough money into the cricket program? Too much
I
for
mean, I
soccer? I don't think the
assume,
players played for both teams at once.
I assume Argentinian sports is similar to Indian sports in that all of the money is going to go to one specific sport and everyone else can go fuck off. So
I
that's
think that's
my,
probably how it works.
yeah. Okay, so you said sorry, Argentina, and then what was the other one?
Malaysia.
Malaysia. Okay, yeah, that makes
Which
sense, I guess.
I haven't really heard about them on the cricket scene recently. I know the U19 Women's World Cup held this year in 2025 was just hosted there.
Okay,
But I don't even know if they like had a team competing or if they just wanted
the
like
host.
to host and to have
Yeah,
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 to
yeah.
have that publicity. I'm not sure. But
Well,
um
maybe if they had done better at this event, they would have had a team
yeah, if they were
succeed
better
for the
40
long
years
term.
ago, maybe 45 years ago. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, so Israel, this was a really interesting thing because I had looked through, I was like, who did what? Israel is credited with a win over Sri Lanka because Sri Lanka refused to play Israel on political grounds, which I know there's been some discussion and some controversy right now since the Taliban officially took power again in Afghanistan about like teams not wanting to play Afghanistan. And then it comes down to, well, there's only three other teams in my pool. And if we get a loss to them, then we have to beat the other two and we still might not advance. Sri Lanka like did that. They went, I think they had two wins, one loss, which was the forfeit and then like a rain out. So three teams in their pool were tied on points, and they did eventually, or they did ultimately advance on run rate, but like they could have just been knocked out without actually losing a game because of this decision. So I thought that was interesting, and I didn't really look too far into like why they made this political statement, and nobody else did, and um, I'm not sure, but I thought it was interesting that like, and obviously I think Sri Lanka cares a little bit less about cricket than like Australia and England, which I think are the two countries that are mostly the ones who have that discourse about boycotting Afghanistan. But it's interesting for sure, and I think this, along with obviously the boycott in South Africa, proves that like cricket's been pretty political for quite a long time.
Yeah, no, that's pretty interesting. I mean, honestly, regardless of where people fall on that decision, props to a team for sticking with what they believe in and making that choice for them. Because obviously, as you said, that could have been very, very bad in terms of their outcome, in terms of their ability to proceed in the overall tournament format. But cool. That's I mean, I didn't know that, and that's pretty cool. And now, like, I guess these are the type of conversations I like have with you, obviously, and then I want to learn more about the overall this era of sports history, and I think that's why we're doing this because one, I get to learn about this, but um, so going into like the top four teams, I guess. I think we kind of talked about it where you said Denmark made the semifinals. Obviously, Canada won the entire thing,
No,
presumably.
Sri Lanka won the entire thing. They ended up beating
Oh,
Canada in the final, but those Sri Lanka and Canada were the two um teams
okay, okay.
that
Two teams.
won the
Okay,
semis. So then they competed in the World Cup, and then at the end they um played like again, I think it was like 2 days before the World Cup final.
gotcha,
Um
gotcha, gotcha. Okay.
to ultimately play for quote unquote winner of the thing. The other, so Sri Lanka beat Denmark in the semis, and then Canada beat Bermuda,
Okay.
which Bermuda is kind of an interesting one of like a British Atlantic island colony, but they're not part of the West Indies, which I
Right,
hadn't
right,
really ever
right.
thought about. I guess I've never really looked into like what makes up the West Indies, so I guess I would have looped them into that or just assumed that they didn't play cricket there. But
Yeah.
good for Bermuda there.
Yeah,
Um,
no.
all right, so moving on to the main event, the World Cup, the Prudential Cup. Um, Gameplay logistics, same as last time. So no player can bowl more than 12 overs. Games are still 60 overs, allocated for 3 days because there are no night games. There's not enough lights. And um, Naresh, I know that kind of the only prep you've done for this is watching a little bit of a highlight video. So you know the finals of this tournament is West Indies versus England. You know that Australia do not get back to the finals. Um, and it turns out Australia actually had a really bad tournament
Mm,
because of a man named Kerry Packer. And I don't know
okay.
if you've ever heard of Kerry Packer
I have not.
or more famously, probably World Series cricket.
What?
So, World Series cricket, and I think we're going to do like a whole episode on this because this is nuts, um,
Okay.
was a I guess you'd call it a league that ran for 2 or 3 years, where this guy named Kerry Packer, who is a rich business guy in Australia who owned a TV channel, talked to Cricket Australia and was like, "Can I get the exclusive rights to broadcast all of Australia's test games on my TV channel?" And they said no. And he said, "Well, screw you." So he started his own cricket like league that was test cricket where he just paid all of Australia's test cricketers insane amounts of money so that they would play for him instead of playing for Australia. And
Right.
then they would go around and play other countries' official test teams because the other countries had no beef with this guy.
Right,
So
right, right.
I know they like played Pakistan. I think they played England and India at some point, and it was usually like three teams. It would be Australia, whatever country they went to, and then the quote unquote international 11 or world 11. I don't know if you've heard about these before. They were pretty big
I
in the
have
70s
not.
and 80s, where like
Mm,
in order to get a three-way series going, there would be like visiting country, host country, and then everybody else all like conglomerated to be a super team of whoever would show
right,
up. And
right.
this guy, Kerry Packer, would pay like tons of money to all these players that they'd come play. And again, I want to do a whole episode on this because like he was the first one to like do night games
Mm,
consistently, and he did like a ton to advance TV cricket broadcasting. But
mm,
ultimately, it meant that while all of the Australian players were like free during the World Cup. They didn't have any congratulatory contractual obligations. Cricket Australia refused to select for the national team anybody who had a contract with this guy. So they basically brought like a C team because all the A and B players were playing for this other guy. So they stunk. And that's why we're not going to talk about Australia anymore in this episode,
mm.
despite the fact that they made the finals last time.
Yeah, no, that's kind of crazy. Honestly, I think this is why Gilmore, rest in peace, my legend. This is probably why his career never took off. He was meant for the World Cup, and he was only given two real games to shine, and he
And
was
he
never
did.
allowed to do it again.
Yeah,
But
no,
yeah, I mean, hey,
it's insane.
World Series of Cricket. I
Yeah.
wonder. See, I
Oh,
wonder how much.
the one other fact, and again, I want to do a whole episode about this. They
Yeah.
didn't play by the quote unquote official rules of cricket because the official, I think they're literally called like the official laws of Test cricket or something,
Yeah.
are copyrighted by the cricket team or the cricket club that Lord's Cricket Ground, where the finals have been,
Right.
is the home pitch. It's the MCC. I forget what it stands for.
Okay.
But they have the copyright of the rules and refused to give them to this guy. So he had to like make some
Nice.
weird rule changes to avoid legal issues.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, no,
That's pretty
it's
cool.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So moving on to actual gameplay. Group A this time around was England, Pakistan, Australia, and Canada. And Group B was the West Indies, New Zealand, India, and Sri Lanka. I want to talk about three of these teams right now that we are not going to talk about too much later on in the semis and the finals. First up being Canada. I know we already talked about them a little bit at the start, and I think made fun of them a little bit as like now they're nowhere. Um, they they didn't belong at this tournament. Sri Lanka seems to be in a weird spot where they're like they're okay kind of playing with the test countries and then
Yeah.
nobody else is. Canada, these are the scores they put at batting. 139 for 9 against Pakistan. I mean, that's respectable, I guess. And then 45 all out in 40 overs against England and 105 all out in 33 overs against Australia, which again, this was like a C team Australia. Huge shout out though to a guy named Franklin Dennis, who against England, remember they put up 45 against England. This dude put up 21 off 99 balls and then got out, hit wicket. He was the second player ever in the World Cup to get out hit wicket after Fredericks, the opening batter for West
In the
Indies in the
finals.
finals in the
Yeah.
previous year, which like that stinks for that guy. He's the only player on his team that got over 5 runs and he got out hit wicket. And I can't find video of it anywhere. I'm like,
Right.
I really wish I could find video of this because that's crazy. But yeah, tough one for Canada. I don't know if you have any thoughts about Canadian cricket, but just wanted to show that
I
like
mean, that's
they allowed an eighth team and it didn't really work out.
yeah. I mean, it's probably along the lines of what I thought from Malaysia, where if they had done better, probably would have taken off. But people, Canadians, probably thought, well, hockey it is, and then they went from there.
Yeah, yeah, that's not great. Second team I would want to talk about is also in this really weird space, and that is New Zealand.
Mm,
So, you'll remember from 1975, they made the semifinals coming out of the easier of the two pools. In this tournament, they once again make it out of the um, make it to the semifinals, although I would argue that this edition kind of only had four good teams or three good teams and New Zealand,
yeah.
with Australia not really bringing a strong side. So like they beat Sri Lanka, they only lost 1 wicket in that chase, and they beat India, they only lost 2 wickets, but then they played West Indies and got absolutely crushed. And it's like they're just in this weird space of like the better teams are much better and the worst teams are much worse. And it's almost like New Zealand is kind of in that spot again today. I know
Hmm.
they won the World Test Championship in like whatever the 19 to 21 cycle, like not the most recent one, but the one before. But other
Yeah.
than that, it feels like it's, I mean, all the way back to the 70s, they're just like in this weird middle space.
Well, I'm really glad you said the word middle because the middle class is dying, and I think New Zealand is a representative of that. I think we can figure out how the economic status of the world is going based on how good New Zealand cricket is. That is my thought process. If they're good,
Do you
that
think
means
when
we're
they're
thriving.
good and they won the Test Championship, the economy was good, like in the middle of COVID, coming out of COVID, that was kind of peak?
Sure, sure. Let's push that narrative. Yeah. Okay, yeah, no, that's pretty. I mean, that's it's one of those things where I mean we see it all the time in sports where especially with a team that is like decently I don't know if how young they were, but like what like you need a team that is not as competitive as the teams that are clearly better than them, but clearly better than everyone else below them. Like they're always in that weird middle ground. And obviously that's why we're talking about it. But if you don't have the ability to play teams that are at your level, you can't really continue to grind better because you're not learning much from someone like a West Indies. In a West Indies game, what are you really learning, right? Like you're gonna get dominated. It's not really helpful, and it's not helpful beating up on a Canada, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, so it's one of those. I wonder if like it has to do with their population. Like I'd have to look. Maybe England is comparable, and obviously West Indies I bet has an even smaller population. But like Australia, India, Pakistan all have much bigger player bases to pull from than New Zealand does.
For
But
sure. I see. I'm wondering if there were any New Zealand players that were allowed to play in the World Series of cricket at this time frame,
I bet
and
one or
maybe they
two
lost.
probably did.
Yeah,
And again, New
I'd
Zealand's
assume.
cricket board wouldn't have been mad at them, and they would have been
Mhm.
allowed to play for New Zealand. Like there were no
Gotcha,
World
gotcha,
Series
gotcha,
cricket matches scheduled for the World Cup. It was just the
gotcha.
grudge
Okay.
that the Australian cricket board was holding.
See, if they had that much of a uh, fortitude to get these players off of their team for the 79 World Cup, maybe some of that fortitude could have helped them with their fielding practice because that's would have had a 75 World Cup by then. But now, what do I know? I'm
And
just a
running practice.
commentator
No
and
running.
running practice.
All
Yeah.
right, final thing before we get to the semifinals, and apologies to you in advance. And that is to highlight Sri Lanka, who in this tournament did become the first non-test nation to be a test nation at an ODI World Cup when they defeated India. 238 for 5 to 191 all out. Top batters for Sri Lanka, and again, apologies for mispronunciations. Sunil Wedamuni, 67 off 120. Roy Diaz, 50 off 88. And Duleep Mendes, 64 off 57. So three different guys there with a half century. Um, and obviously, next time we're talking about India being the World Cup winners. But at this time, like this is like a low, because they, if you'll remember from the pools, um, they got beat by New Zealand too. So like they got beat by New Zealand and Sri Lanka, and obviously England's pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, could not have been a happy, fun uh, plane ride home after that one.
So this is my take, and I know Keegan thoroughly disagrees with what I'm about to say. I think when India loses, it's kind of funny. That's my personal take.
You say that, and then India loses, and then
Well,
you feel
yeah, it's
sad,
funny.
and then you're like, no, it was funny though.
It was funny because the funny, okay, okay. Maybe, maybe them
This is you
losing
coping with
isn't
your
funny.
emotions.
Sorry, maybe them losing isn't funny, but seeing everyone else's reactions who care so much more react, I think is
But
funny.
did they? And like, I don't think you would have the answer to this, and I haven't researched it, but like, up to 1979, had India ever been good at cricket? Had they ever won
I
anything?
I have no idea. From
Like,
I mean, I think
I don't know that it would have been a big deal, just as like it was, oh yeah, it was an expectation, like we always lose,
yeah.
or I mean, and obviously the ODI is just such a new idea. I'm wondering if it's just like fans didn't care. Like you only care if you're winning it. If you don't win, you just say, well, this isn't real cricket. Like that's, I feel like people still do
Yes.
that with T20. Like you just so yeah,
Good way to
I
push the
don't know.
narrative.
But while we're talking on India, I do want to bring us to Sunny G watch. After I badmouthed him in that first episode, he got 8 off 7 balls against West Indies. But then he did come through with a half century, 55 off 144 against New Zealand, before dropping back to 26 off 54 against Sri Lanka. So,
Dude,
um,
he talks way too much shit for someone who kind of cheats. Sorry, I maybe
Yeah,
that's
I mean
blasphemy, but
he
I
got
don't
eight
know.
off the good team and then 55 and 26 off some mid teams. So
Yeah.
is he just what's it called? Stat padding? He's just stat padding against bad
He's
teams?
just
Is that what it is?
I think that he's a stat patter.
I
I think that's what
guarantee
it
we're
is.
gonna do an episode on like the all-time Test cricket's greats, and like his name is gonna come up as
Oh, I
like
think
the
see
number
that's the
one.
thing. I'm pretty sure from like what like my dad and like other like history and such stuff like that that I've seen about him. he's one of like the greatest test players ever because the dude would
Yeah,
not
okay,
get out.
batsman. Yeah.
Like phenomenal. He is the epitome of who you want in a test match. And I think clearly he should not have been on this roster for any type of 1 day match or any form of limited over or
Yeah.
in limited over matches. And yeah, no, when you said, okay, just a quick throwback. When you said 33 off of like 120 balls when they were chasing 330
Yeah.
last week, I thought that was bad. But how are you in a 1 day over or a 1 day in a 1 day match? How are you hitting like what was it, 45 runs or 50 runs in like 140 balls? Like, what are you doing,
55,
bud?
144. Yeah, 55 off
Oh,
144.
dude, what are you
And I
doing?
mean, like
That's
in his defense, like looking through the scorecards of um these matches, very, very few players scored at over 100 strike rate. Very few. And most of the ones that did scored very few runs near the end of their team's batting order because it was
mm,
still like a new idea. And I think T20 is I think I think ODIs and like 60 and 50 over cricket was like, oh, this is test. And then
mm,
T20 was such a big jump that it was like, oh, we have to do something different.
yeah.
And then I think players had good success at T20 and said, oh, I could do this in a 50 over. Like, oh,
Okay.
I can bat 15 or 20 overs. And then if I get out, who cares?
Yeah.
After some, pretty good successes in short forms cricket. So I don't want to like harp too much on him. I just thought it was funny to look up his stats. And I know he's back for 83, so we'll be sure to get an update next episode too. All right. Moving on to the semifinals. England beat New Zealand in what like I think was probably a close game if you were following along, but like looking at the scorecard might not have been. It's one of those weird scores where I'm not really sure how the emotions would have swung. Um, New Zealand won the toss and chose to bowl. Um, England bat for 60 overs, 221 for eight, and then chasing New Zealand also bat for 60 overs and end up losing with 212 runs off 9 wickets. So ultimately they lost by 9 runs. They had 1 wicket in hand. Um, but the reason that I say like I can't really tell if it was exciting to watch was I think the first innings was really exciting because England's batters were like everything or nothing for like the first 6 or 7 guys in the lineup. So your guys that came in at 1, 4, 6, and 7 batted 53 off 115, 71 off 84, 21 off 30, and 42 off 50. Batters 2, 3, and 5 combined for 10 runs. So it was like the guys who were on, and
Yeah.
then there were like other top order batsmen who just had nothing. So they put up a score of 221, which um is doable. I think now you'd put up that score in an ODI and be like, oh yeah, we can chase that down. Like back in the day, it was like that was a solid score.
Yeah.
Um, so New Zealand kept it close, but like they basically needed all 11 guys to score 21 runs, right? If you're going to be like full even, and that's basically what they had. They had one standout player, and everybody else was just like getting 15 to 20 runs before they got out. So John Wright he was the only player on the team to get more than 30 runs. He was 69 off 137. And then like nobody else could do it, and they ended up being able to bat for 60 overs. They didn't lose all their wickets, but they just fell 9 runs short. So it was like England kind of had this boom bust. 4 guys put up huge totals, 3 guys basically did nothing, and then it got to the bowlers. And New Zealand, vice versa, was like one guy did a thing and everybody else, like nobody really did horrible, but like you can't have everybody on the
Just
team
wasn't
put
there.
up 17 and like it's
Yeah.
just not going to work.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, so that's going to close the book on New Zealand. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or like if you have a sense for I feel like it's hard to figure out what the emotional swings were in a cricket game just looking at the scorecard. But like I feel like if you're a New Zealand fan, you would have had hope. Like the run rate I think was
Yeah.
right there throughout. You just kept having guys get out.
Yeah, I think I mean as soon as I mean there's a couple ways I want to go about this, right? As you're telling me this and based off the conversation we were having just maybe like 10, 15 minutes ago about like New Zealand being in the middle class of cricket. How, I guess, of a canary in the coal mine is it for England that they couldn't put away New Zealand, who was potentially struggling, right? Like they weren't as strong as they were in the 75 World Cup is what the consensus is from my understanding. So the fact that New Zealand was able to hang around, if they had one or two people that could have maybe done a few more runs, they would have crossed it. But if I was a fan and going into your question about momentum, why even in going into the last like 3, 4 overs, I would have been like, we have a shot. We have a
Yep.
really good shot. And I think that's the part about cricket that I've really fallen in love with in the last like couple months, where I'm just like, one singular ball can change the momentum in a game. And I think that's so fascinating. And I don't see that in pretty much any other sport. And I think especially if I was a fan and in that scenario in a team that was not expected to be at that level, and the fact that they said, hey, even with what we can do, we're going to keep it competitive. I think that's all you can ask for. And it sucks because obviously you would want them to have gotten there, but I think this is slightly more telling on England and potentially a precursor for what we're seeing in the finals than the English side being that much better than New Zealand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, three of your top seven did nothing against New
Yeah,
Zealand, and West Indies have the best bowling attack in the world. So
yeah.
that can't be good. But keep it moving. So I want to keep this episode a little bit tighter. West Indies beat Pakistan in their semifinal. West Indies 293 for six, bat first. Pakistan all out for 250 and just over 56 overs. Um,
Was Imran Khan still in school?
no, he did play this game. I think he had like one or two wickets. He wasn't the
Okay.
standout bowler. Here, let me explain to you because I think you might have heard like people think this West Indies team might be the best cricket team ever,
It's
like of all
really
time.
funny you say that. Okay.
I
Because
want to give you what happened to Pakistan at the start of this. So West Indies go into bat and they have a first wicket partnership for 132 runs. And then you get an out and then Viv Richards comes in. And then you get another wicket and Clive Lloyd comes in. Like
yeah, yeah,
this
yeah,
was
yeah.
nothing. Their top four, Greenidge, 73 off 107, Desmond Haynes, 65 off 115, and then Richards and Lloyd go 42 off 62, 37 off 38, and then Collis King comes in and goes 34 off 25. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't
no,
end.
that's
And they
unbelievable.
have the best bowling attack in
Um,
the world.
yeah. It's really funny you say that because again, I don't know cricket history like that. I've done basically no prep for this other than watching the highlights because that is what I do. And as I was watching this and knowing some of the limited like 75 and then
Yeah.
83 and like knowing how it's like a 4 year different, I'm sorry, like World Cup is every 4 years. It just immediately as I was watching this team play, I was like, is this one of the greatest cricket teams to have ever played? And that was my thought process before you even mentioned it, before anyone even said anything, because I feel like 83, that's 12 years. That is a long time. Or yes, 85, 75 to and 83, that's what, seven? So no, 8 years. That's 8 years. But like in terms of World Cup cycles, that's like three World Cups. So it's 8 years in this time span. And so you're seeing people that were potentially youngish in their World Cup debut. Now they're in their like well into their prime or
Yeah.
potentially
Remember,
past their
Viv
prime.
Viv Richards was the youngest player on the West Indies team at the 75
Right.
World. He was like 22 or 23.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And now he's in his prime,
Yes.
towards the end of like he's in his prime right now, and then in 83, he's towards like the end of his prime. But like, yeah, like that this 79 team, I was watching them dominate. I was like, oh, this team is legit. And
So
even seeing some of the scores was just ridiculous.
yeah, and I just cut you off because I want to talk a little bit about Pakistan and then we can move to the finals where we'll talk more West Indies. First up, Asif Iqbal took the first four wickets off West Indies. So like kudos to him because they would have been chasing like 350 if this guy hadn't come in. He took all four of those first wickets. That's
Right.
nuts. And then like Pakistan didn't quit. They didn't see that they were chasing down 293 and be like, "Oh no, this stinks." They did lose a wicket early. They went down a wicket with only 10 runs, but then they had a 166 run partnership off of that. Majid Khan, 81 off 124, and Zahir Abbas, 93 off 122. Um, and like we're in with a shout. Like they were really close, right? They only lost by 40 runs.
Mhm.
Um, but they lost their final nine wickets, including when Abbas lost his, for 74 runs.
Mhm.
So they had like this one
Yeah,
amazing pair, and just
yeah,
after that, nothing. So again, I think we talk about this West Indies team as one of the best in the world. We talk about their kind of their first three World Cups as like this insane run, this insane team. Um, Pakistan like almost had them what twice? Because didn't aren't they the
yeah.
team that almost had them in um the first World Cup too?
Yeah, I think that was the one where we were talking about how like if Imran Khan wasn't in school, he could have
Yeah.
potentially like made a difference, like one or two wickets, like he
Yep.
potentially made that makes that difference. Yeah, no, that's definitely interesting. I think for a team that is as dominant as we said, they did have a lot of adversity, which I think has only makes this team better, and I think that's where you start getting into like every single person on this roster can just come in and just absolutely dominate.
Yeah.
And we saw this in the Pakistan game where if the first five batters you said one after the other, you're just unrelenting. And that's not even including, I think, the conversation we had last time where their like eighth or ninth attack came in with like one wicket left and won them the game.
Yeah, Derek
I
Murray,
forget
the
what game.
wicketkeeper. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's just like when you have a team that deep and that just that talented, who is also able to face some adversity, you're getting a mentally tough team that knows that that's confident. And I think confidence is the difference in a lot of matchups.
Yeah, and they took that into the final and absolutely wiped the floor with England. Like absolute domination. England won the toss and chose to bowl. West Indies put 286 on the board. They lost
Yeah.
nine wickets. England ultimately fell for 194 and 51 overs. This was the Viv Richards game. I think people
Yeah.
know about it. I think people talk about it. This was the Viv Richards game. 138 not out off 157 as the number three batsman. He came in at 22 for one, um, and just stayed out
Hmm.
there while all his teammates fell. He kept putting up runs at a really high strike rate.
Yeah.
He hit three sixes in this stand, two of them in the final over. How many runs could he have put up if he wasn't
Yeah.
afraid of losing his wicket? Like if he
Yeah.
had more guys stand with him, like that's crazy. And the two that he put up
Yeah.
in that, I don't know if you noticed these, Naresh, when you watch that highlight video. The
It was
two
like
that
the
he
last
put
two
up,
balls.
yeah, he just steps through and
Hmm.
reverse and it's gone. Like it's not
Yeah.
even close.
Yeah.
So
It's
crazy for
really
him. And
funny.
then real quick, shout out to Collis King, who came in at six. I think he's probably an unsung hero, at least in the eyes of the international world. Hopefully he's beloved in the West Indies. He came in at six, and put up 86 for 66. Like he
Yeah.
was the partner that Richards needed to really make sure that West Indies put up an unreachable number, and he was able to do that.
Yeah, no, it's really funny you say that about Richards. And obviously the King part, those two's partnership. As I was watching, I was like, oh yeah, they are destroying the ball right now. They're playing extremely well. Specifically towards Richards, there was one moment where I think it was like that eighth wicket, or I think it was the eighth or ninth wicket that went down. He just he just looked at his teammate with so much disappointment, and you can tell he it almost was like a disappointed parent, where he was just like, "Guys, I'm doing all of the work. All I'm asking is you not get out." And he was just like,
Oh,
"Bro, what are y'all doing?" But now he watching him play was a ton of fun in terms of in these highlights, and I think that brings up something that I didn't notice. Um, I didn't notice in the original from the 75 World Cup highlights. The dimensions of Lords, I don't know if they were
they're
changed.
weird.
They are weird. I think the first like comparison I immediately thought of was almost like the Polo Grounds, where it because like when you look at it from a certain angle, it feels like the leg side and the cover side, they're just so much shorter. But then you actually see the entire field, and there's parts of the stadium that are just massively long to get a boundary off of, and it's just crazy to see that. And I didn't notice it in 75, and I didn't know if you saw it, but yeah, no, I
Yeah,
that's
they've always been.
wild.
It's weird now. Like when people, and
Okay.
I think it's now known as like a small field compared to some
Okay.
other ones.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it was a weird one. Also, quick shout out to I guess England. All of the bowlers who batted for West Indies in this innings scored 0 runs. So hey,
There you
they got
go.
the bowlers out at least.
Yeah.
England responded with a super weird partnerships. Their opening partnership went for 129 runs, which you're like, oh, that's fantastic. Chasing almost 300 opening boys get us 129. It took them 38 overs. They needed to score at 4 runs and over at the start of the innings. When they first lost a wicket, that run
Yeah.
rate was like 7.2. And
Yeah.
like nowadays, I think you're like, oh, seven, easy. Back in the
Yeah.
day, seven was like unattainable at all. So they kind of just like screwed their team. It took them, yeah. So the rest of the batters had to score 157 in 22 overs. One of the greatest cricket names of all time, Graham Gooch, did give it a shot. He got
Yeah.
32 off 28. But England had 5 players get out for ducks, and were bowled out in just those 51 overs. Final 8 wickets fell for 11 runs. So that's tough.
Yeah.
And then the standout bowler for the West Indies here was Joel Garner, who took 5 for 38. Um, he's the one who's known as Big Joel, Big Bird.
Mhm.
ODI rankings, ICC all time, he is number one. He's
That
considered
makes
the best
sense.
bowler of all time in
Yeah.
ODIs. Um, and then just real quick before we move on to some fun observations from this highlight video we watched, this was the West Indies' last international tournament win for 25 years. They did not win another international tournament until the 2004 Champions Trophy. So
Oh wow.
obviously they make the finals again in 83. I'm not sure if they make any finals after that, but like this was, I guess you could say, like the last fantastic memory for a lot of West Indies cricket fans up until the turn of the
Right.
century.
Oh wow. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. Going into the Garner situation and like the whole like England opening batsman going up until the 38th over and then they finally get out. Imagine doing all of that and you're like, good, you got it, boys. You got 22 overs to kill it. And then they bring out Big Bird. They bring
Yeah.
out Garner. It's nuts. Dude, I watched him bowl and I was like, this dude is massive. I think when there was this one wicket he took, and you can clearly see how much he towered over these
Six foot
rest
eight.
of these.
I noticed that
Oh
too.
my
Yeah, I noticed
God.
that too.
That is
It's crazy.
ridiculous.
He
Oh man,
was
yeah.
26. He was 26 for this World Cup.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's ridiculous. These guys are in their prime. How dude, like we need to do like a deep dive into like West Indies history to straight up West
Yeah.
Indies because how unbelievable is it that some of the greatest players of their generation all were on the same team at the exact same time for about like a 8 to 10 year
I mean,
stretch.
but that's
Like
just
that's
like that
ridiculous.
just happens though. Like look at Australia now. They're about to have nobody, and like obviously they just brought up some young guys who did really well, but like all they have like they've won everything. They own every
Mhm.
trophy in the world except the Champions Trophy and the T20 Trophy right now. All the bilateral tests, the ODI World Cup, everything. And they have you if you look at like their we'll call it 13 or 14 players, like 8 of them are all within 2 years of each other in age range. It's crazy. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Okay, I
is it
guess
just
that's
because they
fair.
play against each other as kids? So they make each other better? Is it just like
Right, right,
randomness?
right.
I don't know. But
Yeah.
like, I bet this happens again. I bet we like go through and we find Pakistan or India or England or someone like has a stretch
Has
with
like
like all
core
their
group
best
of
players
players.
all at
Yeah,
once.
yeah.
I mean, Australia
Yeah, I
had
don't
this
know.
in the 2000s with Ricky Ponting and when
Ricky
he's captain,
Ponting and
they did
yeah.
that too. Like,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know what causes it, but like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're a
All
fan
right.
of that country when they're all good, like, that's
You're in for a
fantastic.
good time. You're in for a good time. Yeah, I don't know. I think it was pretty cool that Garner, like once Garner came in, I think the game was over. Like
Yeah.
it was rough. You can tell with like just watching the highlights, I was like, yeah, this is not great. And the fact that he was on like a hat trick like multiple times in
Yeah.
this game, pretty impressive.
Nuts. Um, few observations for me, and I'll open it up for some observations for you too. First one, I told everyone we would have an update. The shirts didn't become more open; they became less open. And I'm worried that it was not a style thing in 75. I'm worried that it was an Australian thing always.
Mm,
And I didn't see
mm.
any video of Team Australia this World Cup because they were bad. So I'm wondering if it was a style thing that changed or if it was just Team Australia, but disappointing. And then also, I don't know if you caught this, Naresh. There were a few players wearing helmets in the finals. We
Hmm.
watched a highlight video of just the final match. And the commentator did say, referring to the batter whose name is Boycott, unusually in a helmet, um, to literally call out like they don't usually wear helmets and they're terrified of the West Indies, is how I
Yeah,
interpreted that.
yeah, absolutely. And I think we actually in that same like stretch of the video, we saw, I think it was Boycott getting beamed
Yeah,
in the elbow with like a bouncer. And
I
it's
think he
like,
got hit
no,
like here on one,
okay, okay.
like because he was ducking and
Yeah,
yeah,
he was, yeah. It's ridiculous. Like anyone that calls someone out for putting a helmet on, stop it.
yeah,
If you're getting 90-mile-per-hour balls thrown at you, stop it. Please give me everything I can to protect myself. But I think going off of that, the English batsman that had the cap that was falling off every time he ran, love that man. Phenomenal. And the fact that it was like tilted, brilliant. Absolutely
just a
brilliant.
good stylish look. Um,
Exactly.
Final thing I want to say, and I know we talked last time about like there's fans all over. They're running onto the field to throw back fours. They're running onto the field to congratulate catches or to say good job to a player who just got out. Um, and I think last time we were like, this is kind of fun, but also must be terrifying for the players. The end of this game was a problem. And I'm
Yeah.
hoping that we don't see it in 83. I'm hoping they've solved it. But so I'm watching the end of this final highlight video. I see that there's not very much time left on it. There's 9 wickets down. So I know like kind of one of the next things is going to be the 10th wicket. The 10th wicket is a clean bowl. And the batter who got bowled out before I think the wicket keeper had even caught it had a stump out of the ground and was sprinting off the field.
Yeah.
His partner and some of the West Indies players grabbed the other stumps. I think an umpire grabbed one and were sprinting off the field because the fans were all over them. It was like
Yeah.
really dangerous. I'm sure the fans were going to steal the stumps, and that's why the players and the umpires took them. I know at one point there was a collision between two fans. I don't know if you saw this, that like
Mhm.
directly in front of one of the West Indies players who was still trying to get
Yeah.
off, and he was like lucky not to be caught up in that. Um, it was really bad, and I hope that was kind of like the impetus in 80, hopefully in 83 that there's no more fans on the field.
I don't know if we get that lucky in 83 because again, based off the movie, it does look like the fans had stormed the field then as well. But no, that is one of the first things I noticed as well when I watched that video where I was like, there were points where it felt like it was a bit more disciplined, I want to say, from the fans. But then there were, as the game kept going, it was
Yeah,
like, okay, these guys are on the field. They're running up to batsmen when they get out. And like, there was this one dude who, like, full sprint, like, jumped onto the back of a West Indies batsman that had just gotten out. And I was like, bro, that you're asking to, like, get punched in the
yeah,
face.
it's
Like,
crazy.
it's ridiculous. Um, but I think my favorite fan from that final was the one dude in the beginning of the match where he just kept beaking him with the ball. He just had him. He was like, "You want it? You want it? Yeah,
The
I know you want
commentator
it."
was like, "Please, sir, you must throw it," and then he threw it, and the commentator was like, "Good throw, sir."
Yeah,
Come on, so make up your mind. Come on. Well thrown.
dude, we need to bring that back. That is
That commentator
phenomenal.
was fantastic, and he was solo
Yeah,
for 60 overs. That's crazy.
that's
He was
ridiculous.
really good though, and obviously
Mhm.
we're only getting the highlights, but I enjoyed listening to him. My
Yeah.
favorite fan was a guy who was shirtless in jorts. He was like
Yes.
next to a guy who threw a ball back, but he
Yes.
was
Yes. Yes.
fantastic.
Yes. 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 Yep.
Good luck.
I think the only bad thing from this World Cup was that Mr. Scrooge, the umpire,
He
was
wasn't.
not
I think
visible.
I'm gonna find out who he is. I'm gonna find out who he is
Yeah.
and give everybody an update in 1983. So I was gonna say I think he
Okay.
probably died, but that seems a little
Oh
bit mean.
shit.
He
Oh
looked like he was in his
shit.
90s.
Yeah, but they had their local pharmacists ready to go as umps.
Yeah.
Which again, their umpire attire is so funny. They literally in just white coats. And the tie. Did you see the white coats and the tie? That
Yeah.
was super fancy. That
It's
was
a
really
gentleman's
cool.
sport played by gentlemen.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
must
that's what
we
they.
must keep it that way.
Except for the Australians, they're not
Yeah, again,
gentlemen,
I'm disappointed they didn't make the finals because I just like seeing them how they
right?
look.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, no, that was, I think it was a dominant finals, and it's very clear that this was a almost weaker World Cup compared to 75 in terms of the overall talent pool. And I think it was West Indies just absolutely dogged everyone, and it made sense that they dogged nearly, I mean, pretty much everyone, and they won as many as they did, but just phenomenal. I think it was. I wish I could have like seen this team in real life and like experienced them because ever since I've gotten to learn about Viv Richards, I was like, you're probably my favorite batsman now. Like just the level of, I guess, I don't want to say grace, but like the poise and the confidence that you saw him play with, just truly remarkable.
And he was also an
And
all-rounder. Like he was taking wickets.
yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that because I think in 75, he was, I mean, I don't know if I don't know if I wasn't paying attention, but we mostly saw him on the field getting a ton of like
Yeah, and
throws
in
in.
75 it was like Viv Richards the fielder, and then
Yeah.
in this World Cup it was Viv Richards
He
the
was like a
batter.
bowler. Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
think
Or
I
batter.
think in both I think he had like one wicket in the finals of the first game, and I think he
Gotcha.
had one or two in the finals of this year.
Gotcha. And then he had a really good catch going into the deep side.
That was a
Um,
fantastic catch.
yeah, 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 yeah. But yeah, no, it was a hell of a game and pretty dominant victory for one of the greatest teams, obviously, that people have said. So
Yeah, and I think that's going to do it for 1979. We'll talk a lot about West Indies again next time, but this is going to be the last time we talk about them as the winners. And for
hey,
everybody who's an India fan, get hype. Get
hey,
hype for
next week is all about
1983.
Sunny G, baby.
Let's go. Huge Sunny G watch. We're gonna get every game stats for Sunny G next
No, it'll be a
episode.
good one.
But
Yeah.
thanks all for watching. We'll see you next time.